It was a cold, rainy evening when Lila received the letter that would change her life forever. She had just returned from a long day at the bookstore, her hands chilled from the biting wind. As she unlocked the front door of a tiny apartment, her eyes fell on a weathered envelope resting on her doorstep. The paper was old, the ink smudged, and it had no return address. Lila hesitated for a moment, unsure if she should even open it. But curiosity got the better of her. Inside, the letter was simple yet mysterious. It was signed by someone she never expected to hear from again. Her grandmother, Miriam, who had disappeared without a trace nearly 2 decades ago. If you are reading this, the letter began, then the time has come for you to fulfill your destiny. There is a legacy that has been kept hidden for generations, a legacy that only you can uncover. You will need to be brave, for dangers lie ahead, but trust the journey. The first clue is beneath the roots of our family tree. Lila's heart pounded. What was this legacy her grandmother spoke of? Why had she disappeared all those years ago, only to leave this cryptic message now? She knew one thing: she had to find out. The next morning, Lila found herself standing in front of the large oak tree in her grandmother's old, overgrown garden. It had been years since anyone had cared for the property, but the tree still stood tall and strong, its branches swaying in the wind. The roots, thick and twisted, seemed to stretch deep into the earth, as if guarding some ancient secret. Lila knelt down beside the base of the tree, her fingers trembling as she began to dig through the soil. She wasn't sure what she was looking for, but she knew this was the place her grandmother had mentioned. After several minutes of digging, her hands hit something solid. She cleared away the dirt to reveal an old wooden box, its surface covered in strange symbols and markings she couldn't understand. With a mixture of excitement and fear, Lila carefully opened the box. Inside was a small, ornate key and another letter, this one even more cryptic than the last. The key will open the past, the letter read, but only when you find the door it was made for. Begin your search in the city where time stands still. Lila's mind raced. What did this mean? Where was she supposed to go next? And more importantly, why had her grandmother left her these clues? She tucked the key into her pocket, determined to find out. The phrase "city where time stands" still echoed in Lila's mind as she boarded a train bound for Venice, a place often called the city of water and mystery. She had remembered her grandmother telling her stories of the ancient streets, where every alley held a secret and time seemed to slow as the waters of the canals moved like a whisper through the city. It was as good a place as any to begin her search. As the train rattled along the tracks, Lila stared out the window, her mind racing. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. It was just a gut instinct, but one that had kept her on edge ever since she had found the letter and the key. Kai, her best friend since childhood, had insisted on coming with her, and though he sat next to her, engrossed in his book, she was glad to have him along for this journey. Venice is full of history, Kai said suddenly, as if reading her thoughts. If there's a hidden door or some ancient secret, I'm sure it'll be there. Lila nodded, though she couldn't shake the growing unease. Something about this journey felt different, like the stakes were higher than she ever imagined. As Lila and Kai stepped off the train, the atmosphere of Venice wrapped around them like a cloak. The air was thick with the scent of salt water, and the narrow streets, lined with ancient buildings, seemed to close in on them as they walked. Lila clutched the key in her pocket, feeling its weight, both physical and symbolic. She had no idea where to start her search, but the city felt like it was hiding something. She just had to find it. The canals glittered under the fading sunlight as they wandered through the maze-like streets, but Lila couldn't shake the feeling of being followed. The sensation had been with her ever since she opened that first letter, and it was growing stronger by the minute. She glanced over her shoulder several times, but nothing seemed out of place. Just the usual crowd of tourists and locals. Relax, Kai said, noticing her unease. We'll find what we're looking for. This city's old, full of hidden doors and forgotten passageways. If there's a keyhole here, we'll find it. Suddenly, a figure caught Lila's eye. A man, tall and dressed in a dark coat, was standing in the shadow of a nearby building. His eyes were locked onto Lila with an intensity that made her heart skip a beat. She tugged at Kai's sleeve, gesturing toward the man, but by the time Kai turned to look, the stranger had disappeared. Who was that? Lila whispered, her pulse quickening. I didn't see anyone, Kai replied, his brow furrowed. Are you sure? Lila nodded, her hand gripping the key tighter. The stranger's presence had been real, and she had a feeling that whoever he was, he knew something about her quest. But for now, They had no choice but to keep moving. As they wandered deeper into the city, Lila noticed something odd, a symbol etched into the walls of several buildings they passed. It was faint, almost unnoticeable, but it matched the markings on the box she had found under the tree. This was no coincidence. This way, Lila urged, pulling Kai toward a narrow alleyway. The symbols became more frequent as they walked, leading them to a secluded part of the city, far from the bustling squares and tourist attractions. At the end of the alley, they found an ancient-looking door, its wood weathered and cracked. Lila's heart raced as she pulled out the key. Could this be it? Was this the door her grandmother had mentioned? With trembling hands, she slid the key into the lock. It fit perfectly. The door creaked open slowly, revealing a dark corridor that seemed to stretch on forever. A gust of cold air hit Lila and Kai as they peered into the shadows. Despite her nerves, Lila felt a strange pull, as if the corridor was calling to her, urging her to step inside. "Are you sure about this?" Kai asked, his voice filled with uncertainty. "We don't know what's in there." Lila hesitated for a moment, but then nodded. "We've come this far. I need to know what's behind this." With a deep breath, they stepped inside, the door closing behind them with a soft thud. The darkness was oppressive, but as they moved deeper into the corridor, faint light began to emerge from the walls, illuminating their path. Strange, ancient symbols, similar to those on the box, glowed softly, guiding them forward. The air was thick with dust, and the silence was eerie, broken only by the sound of their footsteps. Lila's mind raced with questions. What had her grandmother been involved in? And what exactly was this hidden place? The deeper they went, the more the feeling of being watched returned. It was as though the walls themselves had eyes. Finally, the corridor opened up into a large chamber, the ceiling so high it disappeared into the shadows. At the center of the room stood a pedestal, and atop it rested an old, weathered book, bound in leather and covered in more of the strange symbols. Lila approached cautiously, her heart pounding in her chest. The book seemed ancient, older than anything she had ever seen before. The air around it felt charged, as if the book held a power of its own. "This is it," she whispered, reaching out to touch it. But before her fingers could graze the surface, the sound of footsteps echoed through the chamber. Lila spun around, her heart racing. From the shadows, the same stranger she had seen earlier emerged, his eyes fixed on her. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice low and threatening. Kai stepped forward, ready to defend her, but Lila held him back. "Who are you?" she demanded. "And what do you know about this place?" The man stepped closer, his face partially hidden by the shadows. "I'm the one trying to keep you from making a mistake you'll regret." Lila's mind raced as she stared at the stranger. His presence was intimidating, but she couldn't let fear stop her now. She had come too far to turn back. "What mistake?" she demanded, her voice firmer this time. "What do you know about my grandmother and this legacy?" The man remained silent for a moment, his eyes flicking from Lila to the book on the pedestal. Finally, he spoke, his voice calm but laced with warning. "Your grandmother was part of something much bigger than you realize. That book, it contains knowledge that could change everything, for better or worse. She spent her life protecting it from falling into the wrong hands. I'm here to make sure it stays that way." Lila felt a surge of anger. "Then why leave me the clues? Why involve me if I'm not supposed to be here?" The stranger's expression softened slightly. "Because she trusted you. She believed you might be the one to carry on her mission, but only if you understand the gravity of the situation. The legacy isn't just treasure or power. It's a responsibility, a dangerous one." Kai stepped forward, his voice tense. "If you're so concerned about keeping it safe, why didn't you stop us before we got this far?" The man's gaze shifted to Kai. "Because I wanted to see if you were capable. So far, you've managed to avoid the attention of others who are looking for the same thing. But trust me, you're not the only ones after this. And if they find you, they won't be as forgiving." Lila's heart sank. She had known there would be danger, but hearing it confirmed by this mysterious man made the stakes feel even higher. "What do we do now?" she asked, her voice quieter. The man stepped forward, his hand hovering over the book. "You have two choices. Leave now and forget everything, or take the book and continue down a path that will change your life forever. But once you take it, there's no going back." Lila glanced at Kai, her mind spinning. She had come this far, but was she ready for the unknown dangers ahead? Could she walk away now, knowing what was at stake? Her fingers trembled as they reached out once more, this time firmly gripping the book. "We're not turning back," she said, her voice steady. "This is our legacy now. What do you think will happen?" Subscribe and stay tuned for part 2.